right, that's taken care of. Now, let's talk about why, especially if you've never played it, you need to get the Mass Effect Legendary Edition. It's fantastic and you're going to love it. Let's go. Okay, Mass Effect, for the few people that may not know, is an action role-playing game developed by BioWare. It came out in 2007, and the story takes place beginning in the year 2183. And what happens is civilization is being threatened by a race of highly intelligent, sentient machines called the Reapers. Young Commander Shepard, actually might be Lieutenant Commander back then. In any event, Shepard is tasked with stopping a rogue agent who is intent on helping the Reapers in their galactic invasion. There are 6 different character classes. Each of them have different talents and combat mechanics. I'm not going to go into much of that here because at the end of the day, it's a role-playing game. And the combat mechanics in Mass Effect 1 were a little bit clunky, but they were definitely serviceable. And the combat itself definitely improved over Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3. I'll try to keep spoilers to an absolute minimum for the few people that maybe haven't played the game or aren't familiar with the story, but they did come out in 2007. The third one finished 5 years later, so I would imagine most people know the basic storyline by now. Anyway, let's get on with it. Mass Effect was serious from the beginning about its intention to raise the bar of how storytelling can find new ways to be expressed in video game form. Players can export save files from one game to the next and have the feeling of one single, uninterrupted storyline arcing over 300 hours of gameplay and 5 years of development. All of the choices made over the course of each game, bigger, like which character lives and who dies, or smaller, like if you decide to be polite or nasty in a particular encounter, or who you decide to fall in love with, can be carried over to the next game along with the fallout of those prior decisions. The characters, even the minor ones, feel alive and real, and the voice acting is consistently excellent. BioWare brought in some well-known actors, including Martin Sheen, Carrie-Anne Moss, Lance Hendrickson, Tricia Helfer, Seth Green, and the astronaut Buzz Aldrin. And the soundtrack is fantastic. There are over 6 hours of really good atmospheric and original music. If you've never played the series, I encourage you to play it once with the game soundtrack instead of your own stuff. It is worth it. In the universe of Mass Effect, different species live together and have to share the same space. Conflict exists, and a lot of it's political, but the overall narrative is about how to deal with it and how to learn to overcome differences. If you want to get deep, it's kind of a big metaphor for real life and the need to live together harmoniously. How Shepard solves these different challenges is completely up to you. Sometimes Shepard and his squad mates have to do some really morally challenging stuff for the greater good, and the game lets you see the difficulty of those decisions and the consequence of choosing one path over another. Moral systems in games are mostly pretty clunky, and Mass Effect is really no different, but the system does serve its purpose in the games, and it does get some refinement as time goes on. In Mass Effect, the protagonist can be involved in love, romance, and sex. These are parts of real life, and they deserve to be part of any story that wants to feel consequential and deep. In Mass Effect 1, for the first time, players had the choice to follow whatever orientation they chose for their Shepard. This was not limited to human-on-human scenarios either. Humans and aliens, and even humans with artificial intelligence relationships are explored, and the characters have their own orientation as well. So some will be romanceable by your version of Shepard, and some won't. The outcome of your romantic come-ons isn't assured either. It's driven by certain dialogue checks and completion of selected missions. Unless, of course, you Google it to find out exactly how to respond and how to ensure that trip to Shepard's cabin. Think about it. You read a book, you go to the movies, you're deeply immersed in the story. You feel ownership over those characters and you're invested in how they end up. But the story and the ending are what they are. No matter how much you love that world, you're never more than an observer, and very few authors are going to rewrite their book to change the ending so that you can feel better about it. In a video game, you're an active part of the creative process of storytelling. You can replay and make different choices. You can choose differently and see how that affects the story. Mass Effect fans were so invested in the trilogy ending and how they felt about it that BioWare came out with a different ending and an epilogue that was voiced by Apollo 11 astronaut Buzz Aldrin. The ability to shift how the story unfolds is one of the best things about video games for someone like me who is an avid reader. Mass Effect was always planned as a trilogy. Mass Effect 1 starts off a little slowly because it needs to build the deep, detailed world of Mass Effect and make it consequential to the player. But after a slightly slow start, you meet the villain, and the narrative pace and the action are pretty engaging. Mass Effect 2 starts off on a roller coaster. I remember being completely shocked at the opener of that game by an event that I did not see coming. I was hooked immediately. Throughout the trilogy, the story takes all kinds of twists and turns, but most essentially, it builds the gravity of the threat and Shepard's growth and experience over time so that by Mass Effect 3, you understand why, when the galaxy is faced with complete annihilation, they turn to Shepard. Shepard isn't just some random soldier who stumbled into something or whose dad sticks him in charge of a huge coalition despite having almost no experience. The series is famous for the allies you're going to meet and fight alongside as well. They're some of the best sidekicks in any game, and getting to know them and their species throughout the story is one of the title's biggest pleasures. The Legendary Edition includes almost all DLC too, so unlike when the game came out originally, you can play everything in the best order for both the story and getting your allies on board. In the end, some of these allies will have a real emotional impact on you, and you're going to get pretty attached to them. That is the power of the storytelling. One of Mass Effect's strengths is that it's always been about making difficult choices. The decisions you make and whether you've chosen to do certain missions or not will directly affect who may survive certain other missions. If you make a mess of it, the Normandy can become a pretty lonely ship. The Mass Effect trilogy is one of those series that's extremely immersive and replayable, with a story that will stick with you after you've finished it. Not having to mess around with a bunch of mods to make an old game look reasonable, cleaning up the combat, making Shepard look consistent across all 3 games, not to mention fixing loading times so that you aren't watching yourself go gray on the Citadel elevator, will all make this worth picking up, especially if you've never played it because you didn't want to have to deal with stuff like that. If you haven't played the series, you really need to hop on board the Normandy when the Legendary Edition drops on May 14th. Thanks for listening and enjoy your day.